Good morning. Nice to see everybody. My name is Len Noe, pronounced no, opposite of yes. And if you ask my parents, I was named very, very appropriately. I've heard Len, no, pretty much my whole damn life. I'm a technical evangelist, white hat, and a biohacker. I currently work for CyberArk Software. I'm a global security speaker, and I've been with my company now for just over 9 years. I've been in IT professionally for going on 26 years in roles ranging from programmers to systems architects, and I've been breaking into computers since the Commodore 64 days and spent a large amount of my time in my youth as a black or a gray hat hacker. I'm professionally trained as well as I've come by a lot of my knowledge through practical application. I'm very active on social media, and I invite everyone here to reach out over LinkedIn and check out my GitHub and my YouTube channels for some additional security-related content. So I wanted to ask everyone here today a very simple question to start this talk. What does a cyborg look like? If you hear the question, I'm sure that you have something in your head, and it might look something like Darth Vader. Maybe it looks like a Cylon from Battlestar Galactica. The truth of the matter is, I would be willing to bet that it probably has some type of robotic function or feature look. And the truth is, that is just not the case anymore. These are my hands. I am a biohacker in the truest sense of the word. I am not only a white hat, but I'm also an augmented human who has decided to take advantage of the available implantable technology to turn myself into the attack vector. I'm going to go through real quick, and I'm going to explain what my current chips are. Unfortunately, this particular X-ray is a little bit out of date. That only looks like I have 4. When the truth is, currently I have 8. I'm actually just healing up from the last 2 that I implanted about a week and a half ago. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to start explaining what kind of craziness I've decided to put into my body. So the first chip you see here is called a Flex Next. This is a combination RFID NFC chip, and it has a very, very large range. And yes, I'm the Texan that was down in the front row, so unfortunately I failed. I remember back in the US when I was back in primary school, they were like, okay, we're all going to change to the metric system on Thursday. Thursday came and we went, yeah, no. So somebody here might be able to help me out here. The range on this particular chip is right about 3.5 to 4 inches. So what would that be in metric here? Anybody? 10? About 10. Okay. I'll take that. You could be lying to me. Like I said, I failed that day in school. But this allows me the ability to actually have enough range on this microchip to be actually able to hold a cell phone or a mobile device in the proper, correct orientation and still be able to trigger the reader within the mobile device. Excuse me. I have what is called a Next chip. This was actually the very first implant that I ever got. It's exactly the same as the larger Flex Next. The only major difference between the two is the range. This one I have maybe about 1/2 inch, so yeah, about that much. You almost have to be sitting directly on top of the receiver. I'll be going into a more thorough description of the actual implants in the next couple of slides. As I said, my original purpose for actually getting these was for the purposes of offensive security, and this just didn't meet my needs as far as being able to properly socially engineer the ability to connect with that receiver. I have a Flex M1 Magic. This chip allows me to emulate any number of older access cards from public transit to membership tokens or other physical access. I have what is called a VivoKey Spark 2. This is actually a crypto-bionic chip that can perform strong cryptographic functions. Actually has a companion app on my cell phone, is actually part of a triple-factor authentication to access my cryptocurrency wallet. Since the time these X-rays were taken, I actually have 4 additional implants. I have a Flex EM. This allows me to emulate most of the popular current physical access cards, including Prox 2 and 3, HID, Indala, Pyramid, and a ton more. I have a Titan biomagnet in my pinky. This allows me to actually be able to feel electromagnetic fields and electromagnetic currents. And I get the question all the time, so what does that actually do for you? To my red out people that were up here before me, I've seen your product before, guys. Love it. If we're dealing with a physical penetration test, like I said, I come from the United States where most of our warehouses are using some type of magnetic lock for their exterior entry systems. This allows me the ability to actually run my hands over the outside of the wall and actually be able to trace the electrical conduit to where the magnets are in the hopes of trying to find a place to be able to shim those locks. And 2 weeks ago, I actually just put in a Flex Desfire V2. This is a 13.56 megahertz ISO 14443A and NFC Type 4 Desfire EV2 chip with 8 kilobytes of memory. So it's got a lot of storage available in it. And just for the fun of it, in the front of my left hand, I put a chip. It's called the Walletmore. This is actually a credit card processing chip. It's a prepaid debit or credit card that I can actually use my hand to do tap to pay the same way that you would do with Apple Pay or Android wallets. I'm currently in the process of working with the distributor within the United States, a company called Dangerous Things, and I'll even get this question out of the way in front here. Here in Europe, you guys have an amazing distributor called KSEC that basically deal with the same type of technological implants, and if you find this stuff interesting, hit me up after my talk. I'd be happy to help steer you in the correct way to joining me in the realms of being a transhuman. So I am in the process of working on getting a customized peg leg built, but we're going to talk about that in a couple of slides. So as I said, augmented humans are not science fiction. We are science fact, and we are here, and we're not going anywhere. And as the technology will continue to evolve, so will we. And as security professionals, we need to be aware of these new attack vectors and be able to layer our security in order to be able to, layer our security in order to be able to countermeasure these new attack vectors. So I've broken the talk into 3 quick parts: yesterday, today, and tomorrow. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on the history of the transhuman movement, just enough to show that the biohacker, transhuman, or grinder is actually just the point where science, technology, and humanity have all collided. The idea behind implanting technology inside the human body has been around since the 1950s. The patent for the first cardiac pacemaker was submitted in the United States in 1952 and was actually the size of a table radio. With the advent of the transistor in the mid-1950s, the ability to construct a fully implantable device was achieved in May of 1958. The first human to actually receive an electronic device implanted into the body was in Buffalo, New York in 1960. 1964 gave host to the first implantable technology that could actually take data from the body as feedback and give varied responses based on that input. The 70s and 80s, there were a lot of different advancements in biomedical, but nothing that would really set the world on its ear. 1990 is when things really started to pick up for the biomed, from the creation of smart devices all the way through to smart prosthetics, to where today the concepts and discussions around artificial intelligence and machine learning are pretty commonplace. For biohackers, our history was forged by the medical profession to address deficiencies of the human body. But it was always from a reactive perspective. And by that, I mean the issues were already there, and there was really no options for an individual to be able to enhance themselves through technology. So, who are we today? Today, people like myself are referred to by, like I said, all kinds of different names. I've been called a biohacker, a grinder, a transhuman. Somebody even called me a wet work when I was in Sweden a couple of weeks ago. Don't really know how to respond to that one, but to each their own. Regardless of whatever name you want to put on us, we all share the concept of moving beyond the human form that we were born into. The term transhuman was actually first coined by Julian Huxley back in 1957, and the movement he created was fueled by multiple people looking to extend the capabilities of the human body itself. So, where do you find implantable technology? Anybody want to guess? Come on, this is a security conference. Where do we find everything? Thank you. The internet. We can find anything on the internet. There are multiple different manufacturers to choose from. Like I said before, I personally work exclusively with a company called Dangerous Things out of Seattle, Washington. I don't work for them. I don't get a kickback from them. They're just the ones that I've done the research, and they're the ones that I feel comfortable with. If I was actually here in Europe, I would be using a company called KSEC. So what type of commercial grade implants are available? So we actually have magnets. We have both lifting magnets as well as biosensing magnets. We have flexible membraned NFC or near field communication chips. We have flexible membraned RFID chips. We have bioglass encapsulated NFC and RFID and even combination chips. And if you recall from when we were looking at my x-rays earlier, you can see the differences here very clearly with the amount of coiled copper we have for antennas under the flexible membrane, as opposed to the entire chip being encased in that little piece of bioglass. Those bioglass implants are not much larger than one piece of long grain rice. So they work, but at the same time, the range on them is much, much smaller. And I know that you guys here in Paris and Europe, you guys are a party bunch, so I've saved the best for last. We even have the ability to implant LEDs. So when you guys go out to the raves, you got the glow stick in one hand and you can look like Iron Man in the other hand. You know, I'm not going to go into the procedures on how we implant these devices, but let's just say at a minimum you're looking at needles that are about a 4 gauge if you're into body piercing, so that's about the size of a pencil or a pen. And on the worst case, you're looking at scalpels, dermal elevators, and sutures. So yes, I'm quite dedicated to my craft. These devices were actually designed to make people's lives easier. You know, imagine, we have the ability to start our vehicles. There's actually an implant, if you have a Tesla Model 3, you can actually put your valet signal on the chip, and you can just get in your car and drive. How many people have fobs to access a gym or maybe a shared garage or a storage unit? All of these would be considered legitimate use cases for implantable technology. Like I said, I now have the ability to pay for goods and services the same way that you could with Apple Pay or Android Wallet. And I will say from a personal perspective, there's nothing more amusing than walking up to a vending machine, tapping your hand, grabbing a soda, and watching everybody around you just lose their mind. I actually had one person come up behind me and just start smacking, the receiver with their hand going, "Why can't I get one?" But every one of these particular use cases would constitute a legitimate use case for one of these types of devices. Unfortunately, not all of us are friendly. As security professionals, we need to start looking beyond what we're comfortable with, beyond the normal attack vectors that we've been hearing about for years. The attacks in the end game may not have changed, but the delivery methods have come right off of the movie screen and into our companies, our infrastructures, and our data centers. Security admins know the normal attack vectors, but how do you address the fact that any one of your employees or visitors could potentially have a full Linux system beneath their skin? What if someone implanted an HID or a proximity access chip? There would be no evidence of any type to the naked eye of a physical compromise of a physical location. It's not like the old days where I'd have a Proxmark or some type of chip cloner. I can just write that data into one of my implants, access your secured locations on-prem, and even if you catch me, what's the worst that's going to happen? The police are going to come up, they're going to search me, and all I have to say is, "Look, man, I was touring the building. The door was open. I thought this room looked pretty cool. Had a bunch of computers in it." They can search me. They'll never find any type of nefarious tools. And at the end of the day, all they're going to do is trespass me and kick me off your property. Chip implants utilize the exact same technologies that enterprises are using. RFID, door badges, NFC for IoT, MyFair, HID, Prox, or Pyramid, and these are just a few. With the number of regulations and audits that companies are required to do for compliance, how would you know if someone has bypassed your security policy and brought a rogue asset into your environment under the skin? The simple answer is you wouldn't. This is called a peg leg. This is a single board computer that's been modified to a minimalist form factor with a wireless charging receiver, then encased in biopolymer and implanted within the body. Typically, it's implanted right here underneath the pocket, and the reason being is there's no battery on this. What you would do is you would take a wireless charging external battery, slide it into your pants pocket, it would then energize the receiver, and you could actually access it via your cell phone. You know, the possibilities of a concealed Linux system are only limited by one's imagination. These devices have Wi-Fi, Bluetooth capabilities, and like I said, you can SSH directly to these over your cell phone, and yes, you can put Kali on them. I'm actually in the process of working with Dangerous Things right now to actually get a custom-made PCB. I'm not going to use a Raspberry Pi Zero W, there's only one Wi-Fi on it. So I've actually been working with a KiCad designer, and we've actually designed a Raspberry Pi Zero that I call the Hacker Edition. It actually has dual Wi-Fi, so I can actually perform things like Wi-Fi Pumpkin, and we've actually also added the ability to do USB sharing, so I can actually hook it up to, say, a crazy radio PA and be able to do responder and mouse jacking and jacket attacks triggered off of my cell phone. At the rate I'm going, though, it probably may be Q4 or early 2023 before we're finally done with all the testing. I may be crazy, but I'm not stupid. So as a result, I am very cautious as to what I put into my body. I want to make sure that it's not going to leak any type of heavy metals and cause me any type of health issues later on down the road. So let's talk about some of the attack vectors. The first one I'm going to show you guys today is around the issue of physical access. Any company will have restricted locations on-prem. It's just kind of the ways of doing business. Not everybody will always have access to everything. I'd be willing to bet that probably somebody in attendance here has a work badge on them. Anybody want to raise a hand? Okay, I got at least one. Appreciate it. Let's talk about how easy it is to actually do this. So the first attack, since they're my attack vectors, I got to name them. The first one I named Handshake. Handshake is a clone and replay attack. Utilizes a tool like a Proxmark or a Flipper Zero to read the data contained on a card or a fob, and then I'm going to use that same data, write it down to one of my implants. In this case, it's going to be the tag implant in my left hand. So I'm a very, very interactive presenter. I'm very transparent. I want you guys to see this because the truth is, we'll get to the fact that there's no way to stop this in terms of detection when we get to the end of the presentation. So let's go ahead and let's kick it off. I'm going to start off by firing off my Proxmark Chameleon tool. And yes, that is my old badge, and yes, I look like every piece of hacker clip art you've ever seen in your life. So as you can see, we've got a new UID that was actually imported. From here, we can go in, we can actually take a look at the sectors that were scraped. We're going to go ahead and give this a friendly name of Lens ID. From here, now we have our baseline. Let's go ahead and scan my implant. So quickly, now we will see that we have a new UID that's been imported. We can open up that, take a look at the sectors, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to rename that one to implant. Now at this point, if you're part of any type of larger hacker collective, this information is now able to be actually shared amongst your group. So just show how easy it is, I'm going to upload both of these things into Google Drive and share them out with all of my buddies, and the next thing you know, we're going to start hanging out in your break room and drinking all your coffee. From here, I'm going to open up the MyFair Classic tool, and keep in mind, in this particular example, all of the stuff I'm doing is being executed from my cell phone, so it's not like I need any additional tools. So we're going to pull those down out of Google Drive into the MyFair Classic tool, and then we're going to run a diff command against them, and we're going to actually take a look at what's different between my implant and my original ID. So we come up, select the implant, select the ID, and you'll see that the only thing that is different between the two is sector 0, line A. At this point, all I have to do is just actually say write the data. Go ahead and we'll write this down to the chip in my hand. And it was very difficult trying to show you guys every step of this because some of it's actually on my body and some of it's on a computer screen, so I'm doing the best I can, and I hope you're able to follow along. At this point, now we'll go ahead and we'll just map all the sectors for verification, and then turn around and use the Proxmark Chameleon once again, and we'll go ahead and get a new read and then compare the original ID to what's on the implant now. So we go ahead, we scan the implant the second time, imports the UID. We're going to go ahead and name this one Implant 2. And at this point, if you take a look, and we should be jumping back into Len's ID. And if you take a look, the last couple of characters are 6860. Then we can go into my Implant 2, and it's 6860. So now I have an exact duplicate of your ID sitting on my hand. Now, as I said, this may not be brand new because people have been scanning and cloning ID cards now for over a decade. What makes this a little bit different is the fact that I can now compromise that same information, and I can do it with absolutely zero indications of compromise if I'm actually detected. The next two attacks I'm going to show you guys today are going to be around the technologies of near-field communication. You know, it's an amazing technology, and many of us have it in our pockets right now. Every Android device has full access to transmit or receive NFC data. Standard NFC utilization could be anything from beaming a file to using an app to transmit a signal to a receiver to allow some type of action to take place. The implant that I'm going to be using for the next two examples is going to be that large Flex Next. And in case I didn't show y'all, that's what it looks like in the body. So yeah, like I said, I'm dedicated to my craft. So the first one I'm going to show you guys is leprosy. Again, my attack, I got to name it. This attack may not always work. It also will not currently work against iPhones due to the proprietaryism of their NFC chip, but if you've been following the news lately, Apple is actually currently being sued over the proprietaryism of this chip in the European courts. And they lost the battle against the Lightning charger, so I think it's a 50-50 as to whether or not they're actually going to lose the ability to lock down that NFC chip. If they do, the iPhones will be just as vulnerable as the Androids. So this one is pretty simple. All I have to do is actually get the device in my hand, and at this point, it's just a matter of social engineering the situation. This attack, as well as Flash Hook, are designed to be actually performed in plain sight and actually in the presence of my targets. You know, this is a wonderful conference. I'm very grateful to be here. We've got a lot of wonderful people here today. You know, if I was to start making a big scene about an issue with my wife or my daughter or my granddaughter, you know, and I was pleading for somebody to help me make a phone call because my phone died, I know that the Good Samaritan in somebody here would be here to be my victim. Once the phone or tablet is in my hands, the receiver and the device will pick up the tag I have programmed in my hand that is currently pointing to a web location containing an infected APK that I used MSF Venom to create. So as I'm sitting there going through the motions of freaking out trying to remember a phone number, what I'm actually doing is installing this APK on your device and then quickly giving it back to you. So I'm going to do this in real time. So just as I said before, I'm a very transparent presenter. I want you guys to learn, and hopefully you can actually get something out of this. So I'm using an ngrok session in the top for obfuscation, and I'm going to actually launch Metasploit in the lower window. So we kick off Metasploit and load up a resource file and start a listener. And as soon as we switch over, I'm going to go into my actual act here. Ready? Let's go ahead and start the listener. Oh my God, can somebody help me out here? my granddaughter was just in an accident, my phone died. Oh, thank you. All right, now I got to remember, what's the country code for the United States? +1, no, it's +1. Shoot, normally it's just in my contacts. Who remembers phone numbers anymore? Everything's maintained in the cell phone now. Oh, shoot, okay, my wife's phone number is +1 734. Oh my God, what is it? 7344561. Man, I really appreciate. I'm just gonna go plug my phone in. We're done. I've popped a reverse shell on your device. And I'm not going to go really too heavy into the post-exploitation, but I mean, I can run sysinfo, dump your call logs, dump your SMSs, even pop a shell if you're on an Android and traverse your entire file structure. Upload things, download things. At this point, it's basically whatever I want to do. So, just to show, yep, there's an LS against the SD card in the cell phone. And it's that quick. So the final use case that I'm going to show you guys today is one that I've named Flesh Hook. This one is a little bit more dangerous because this one is cross-platform. If you have an iPhone, I'll get you. If you have an Android, I'll get you. In this one particular use case, I programmed the chip in my hand to point to a website that I have infected with the Beef suite. And if anybody here not familiar with Beef? Okay, I see a couple of hands. Beef is the browser extension exploit framework. This is the website that we've all heard about where it's like, if you go to a website, the bad guys can hack you the minute you bring up the web page. Yes, that's true. This is the tool that does it. So in this case, I deal with a lot of IT people. So what I've done is I've actually made a copy of the Putty website and basically infected it with the Java hook from Beef. So this requires, as I said, just a little bit of social engineering, but if we just went through that exercise in the last example, if I'm making a big scene and making a fool out of myself, somebody's going to try and help me. So let's see how this one looks in reality. Again, we go ahead and we kick off Beef. And the scary thing is, this actually takes longer to actually start Beef than it does to actually compromise the device. And as long as that web page stays up, I have a connection, and through the modules within the Beef suite, I can actually gain permanent persistence as well as do on-device spear phishing attacks. So we can bring up the Beef control panel and log in as the administrator. Beef. Funny, I'm from Texas. I never really put those two and two together. But as you can see over on the left-hand side, we have a bunch of previous devices that I was able to hook. Here's some really ugly guy with a bad beard. Again, all I'm doing is, hey, let me see your phone. I got a YouTube video I want to show you. I click this, pull this up, quickly go into your YouTube. But at this point, I've already hooked the browser within Beef. From the general first page, I can gain all kinds of system information in regards to what type of device, firmware, all kinds of things. From there, it also allows me access to the complete embedded suite of all of the tools within the Beef suite. I can geolocate your device. If you are part of a LAN, I can enumerate your network. I can do a DNS reverse sweep. The suite provides all kinds of things. So as you can see, I ran a geolocation and it says that I'm in Pflugerville, Texas, and that's pretty much where I was when I actually ran this. We have the ability to get persistence. I can even, depending on the firmware of your device, I can turn on your cameras and list your microphones, and I can actually see and listen to whatever is going on wherever you are. Just to show the fun of it, I'm going to go ahead and do a ping sweep for everything that is actually on the network that I'm currently on and return that back just as a way to show that we've got some data. So we kind of talked a little bit about where the TransHuman came from. We've talked about what types of capabilities there are for people like myself in the world today. So let's talk a little bit about where are we going to be going in the future. When we talk about the future of implants and implanted technologies, It's like we're trying to write a brand new science fiction movie. Companies like Tesla are working on technology like the Neuralink. This is basically what is called a BCI, or a brain-computer interface. This will allow interfacing between the brain directly to a computer system. From my perspective, that sounds like a man-in-the-middle scenario just waiting to happen. You know, not many have ever heard of another company called Synchron. They are Neuralink's actually biggest competitor, and they are currently in human trials, and they're showing amazing results. We have products like the Willet. This is a Bluetooth receiver that requires no batteries and gets its power from the air. And everybody knows that Bluetooth is not vulnerable and the most secure thing in the world, right? Wrong. Ever heard of Blueborn? Imagine if that could actually, instead of jumping from device to device, could jump from a person to a person. What about implantable Wi-Fi transmitters and receivers? There's a product in development right now called the Neurograin. Their hope is to turn the human race into the world's largest Wi-Fi network through a mesh, and be able to bring Wi-Fi access to places that most people would not be able to get it. This, to me, sounds like we may be able to redefine the old term of "I'm hacking my neighbor's Wi-Fi." These are just what we know about. You know, currently the biggest restriction to advanced technology implants is the power source. There is currently no effective way to provide clean power to any devices on a commercial-grade implant. It's the same reason why, when we were showing the peg leg earlier, that we're using that indirect power receiver. Anybody here ever charge their phone wirelessly on one of those wireless charging pads? How hot is it when you pick it up? That is not something that you want going on inside your body. It's not always the computer technology that is holding up progress. In this case, the technology that needs to catch up is the power source. You know, and once that's been addressed, the possibilities of a 24/7 access to embedded system within the body is not that far off. So I try to keep at least 10 minutes of my time, because usually I have a lot of questions. So at this point, I'd like to open the floor. Who wants to be the first one to ask me how I get through airports?
I was going to ask you another question. How do you get through airports?
I walk through the metal detector.
And?
They never catch it. None. I've been through the magnetometers. I've been through the x-rays. When it comes to air travel, and I'm going to carbon date myself here. Again, I'm from the United States, and so are you, so you'll remember this. Before the Transportation Safety Advisory Council, or TSA, airport security was actually privately contracted, and I was an airport security guard. And don't quote me on this, but granted, this was over 20 some odd years ago. In order to set off a magnetometer at an airport, you needed to have the total combined metallic weight of a .22 bullet. And the problem is if you think about my implants, the only thing that are metal is the antennas. Everything else is silicon, with the exception of my Titan biomagnet, which is an iron core wrapped in titanium. But the total metallic mass is not enough to actually set off a metal detector.
What about the scanners that'll even find
this? Nope. And even if they did, it's within the skin. I know within the United States we have laws like HIPAA. They're not allowed to ask. I'm assuming that there are similar regulations in terms of health and privacy here within Europe. So even if they come up and something did, which I have been international flying for years with these things, I've never triggered any magnetometer, any x-ray. The only thing that scares me in this life are stronger magnets and MRI machines. Because, everybody's like, Len, you're this big, intimidating, scary-looking person. I am terrified of magnets. Do you know how much it hurts to have a magnet inside your skin and then somebody come up with like an earth magnet and snap it on there? You don't know pain until you've been pinched on the inside and outside of your skin. So there are a lot of different things, but the truth is there is no detection capability for this right now. I mean, all of my implants are passive, so that means they get their power from the receivers. So while I'm just standing here, if there's no high frequency or low frequency reader, they're dormant. In order to stop somebody like me, you would need to have some type of spectrum analyzer listening on both high frequency and low frequency all the time. To that point, within the United States, like I said, I live in just outside of Austin, Texas. I was reading an article a couple of weeks ago where there is a new type of police canine that's coming out on the scene. They now have technology sniffing dogs. These are being primarily used in terms of combating human trafficking, child pornography, things of that nature. And they've trained these dogs to be able to try and smell specific parts of technological components. So I've reached out to them, and I've actually been invited up to Dallas to see whether or not these technology sniffing dogs may be able to sniff the technology within my implants. And just from an outside perspective, if you think back to the Terminator movies, you know, the resistance was always down underground, and they always had dogs sniffing to try and find the cyborgs. And it's funny because I look at it and I wonder, is this a situation where life is going to imitate art or art is going to imitate life? But currently there is no way to detect me. So the only way to deal with this is to honestly go with a true layered security approach. You know, don't have single points of failure. One of the things that I love to point out is, you know, we have no problem putting multi-factor authentication in front of any of our high-value data, but how many times when you walk into someone's data center, there's just a badge reader on the door that you scan and you walk right in? You know, if you want to stop people like me, you're going to have to start layering that security. It's going to have to be multi-factored, something that I can't necessarily replicate onto any of my current implants. All right, well, with that, I will give the remaining 30 seconds back, and I'd like to thank you guys very much for the opportunity to come and present, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the conference.